For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. This player right here is Carolina Panthers defensive end and Hall of Fame defensive end Julius Peppers. And many people would say that in the 30-year history of the Panthers franchise, that he is the greatest player of all time. At minimum, he's top 3 with Steve Smith and Luke Kuechly. Peppers isn't just arguably the greatest player in Panthers history, but he's one of the greatest players in the history of the NFL. And there's a reason that this year, he got inducted into the Hall of Fame on the very first ballot. In his 17-year career, he had 159.5 sacks, which ranks 5th all-time in NFL history, only behind Bruce Smith, Reggie White, Deacon Jones unofficially, and Kevin Green. He was named the AP Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2002. He was named a Pro Bowler 9 times. He was named an AP First Team All-Pro 3 times. And he had 10 seasons with double-digit sacks, consistently being a menace for opposing offenses and offensive lines. I could go on about just how good Peppers was as a player, and how he's one of the greatest pass rushers in the over century-long history of the National Football League, because the accolades and the accomplishments are too plentiful to mention. However, if you ask people what his worst season was, most people would say that it was the 2007 season. For whatever reason, things never seemed to get going that year, both for the Panthers as a team and for Peppers as a player. He was elite in 2006 and would return to form and become elite again in 2008. But in 2007, for whatever reason, whether it was just one of those years or a knee injury that was nagging him, he wasn't the same player and dominant force that NFL fans had grown accustomed to seeing. That was, except for one game. There was one game where he looked like vintage Julius Peppers and looked like a dominant force. And the reason it happened? It was because of a complete lie. You know how you say things to people to try and get them to do something, even though you know they're not even remotely true, but they sound good and they take the bait? You tell your 8-year-old to eat his vegetables because everyone in the NBA eats their vegetables, even though you know for a fact that your kid is never playing in the NBA. You tell your 4-year-old to go to bed because he loves Spider-Man, and the only reason Spider-Man was so good at what he did was because he got a good night of sleep and had an early bedtime, even though you know that's not true. Well, during a 2007 game between the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints, that's exactly what happened with Panthers head coach John Fox and his star defensive end, Julius Peppers, where Fox was able to motivate Peppers off of a complete lie. And I don't mean that Fox got one minor detail wrong. I meant that he got the entire story wrong, but hey, whatever it takes. This is one of those moments of the age-old question of whether the ends justify the means. And nearly 2 decades later, we're taking a deep dive into that today. And yes, I feel old saying that 2007 is nearly 2 decades later. Because this is the story behind this man right here, Carolina Panthers defensive end Julius Peppers, and how a complete lie by John Fox ended up motivating him and making him great. Before I talk about the thing that John Fox did regarding Julius Peppers that left everyone scratching their head, we need some context to understand not just the importance of this game, but how Peppers was playing beforehand. It's October 7th, 2007. It's Week 5 of the NFL season, and we've got a big game on our hands down in the NFC South between the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. In many ways, this feels like an absolute must-win for the Panthers, who enter this 1-2-2, because following a loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 4 by a final score of 20-7, this seemed like a team on the verge of tailspinning if things went haywire against the winless Saints. After that game, defensive tackle Chris Jenkins said that the team had no heart, and he wasn't backing down from those comments. Win this game, and you can possibly work yourself into a tie for first place in the NFC South, depending on what first place Tampa did in their game. Lose this game, and things could get incredibly ugly incredibly quickly. And one of the reasons why the Panthers were struggling through their first 4 games and were just 500 was because their defense was not up to snuff at all. Over their last 3 games entering this one, the Panthers were allowing an average of 25 points per game, and a big reason for that was the ineffective play of none other than Julius Peppers. You'll notice as you're watching these defensive lowlights that there's a player you're not seeing on your screen and not standing out, and that's Julius Peppers. And there's a reason for that, because through the first quarter of the season, he had done absolutely nothing. The Panthers had a top 10 defense in 2006, thanks to a first-team All-Pro season from Peppers where he had 13 sacks. But we were 4 games into 2007, and Peppers had 0 sacks. If there was ever a game for him to finally get going and get things back on track, this was the game. Against the division rival New Orleans Saints to get above 500 and turn the season around, this was the game. And sure enough, the Carolina Panthers went into the Superdome and got the win, taking it by a final score of 16-13. It was not easy by any means, as entering the fourth quarter, the Panthers were trailing by a score of 13-6, and it wasn't easy doing this without their starting quarterback, Jake Delhomme, and with an injured backup quarterback in David Carr, who took a shot during the game in the first quarter, left for a bit, and thought for a brief moment that he was never going to be able to play again. However, despite having just 12 first downs, despite converting less than 50% of their third down conversions, despite committing 7 penalties for 59 yards, more than the Saints committed, and despite holding onto the ball for under 25 minutes, the Panthers found a way to win, doing so on a walk-off field goal by John Casey from 52 yards out. Somehow, the Panthers had gone into New Orleans and had pulled off the minor upset. So much for a team that, according to one of their own, had no heart. But the best player on the field for the Panthers on this day? Well, that might have been none other than Julius Peppers. Because simply put, the Panthers don't win this game without Peppers. He batted down not 1, but 2 passes, and his biggest play of the game, by far, came in the fourth quarter, with the Saints up by 7 points, and about to go up by 2 scores on a chip shot, 20-yard field goal by Alindo Mare. No way he misses this kick, right? Well, sure enough, Peppers is able to get a hand in there and block the kick, keeping the Saints off the board, keeping it at a 1-score game, and completely flipping the momentum of the game around. For the first time all season, Peppers was the best player on the field, just as he had been for tons of games in 2006. For the first time all season, Peppers looked elite, and looked like a force that the Saints had no answers for. Which raises the question, what changed? What caused Julius Peppers to play lights out and play motivated and play like a completely different player? Or I guess, the player we saw throughout the entire 2006 season? Well, after the game, both Peppers and Fox attributed it to some help from this man right here, none other than New York Giants defensive end Michael Strahan. Before becoming the head coach of the Panthers in 2002, John Fox was the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants, serving there from 1997 to 2001 under Jim Fassel. And during Fox's final season in New York, in 2001, this man right here, Michael Strahan, had one of the greatest seasons by any player in NFL history. The future Hall of Fame defensive end was an absolute menace that year, finishing the season as not just a Pro Bowler and not just an AP First Team All-Pro, but as the AP Defensive Player of the Year, recording an incredible 22.5 sacks. How great was that total? Well, since sacks became an official statistic in 1982, that number is the all-time record. Unofficially, Detroit Lions man Al Baker holds the record with 23 sacks in 1978, but in the official era, Strahan was, and still is, the all-time single-season sack leader, hosting one of the greatest defensive seasons of all time. Fox saw something special in Peppers the same way that he saw something special in Strahan. The night before the game, Fox talked with Peppers and said that even though Strahan was incredible in 2001, what a lot of people forget about that season with this man right here was that he struggled mightily to start the season off. When the season started, people were wondering whether Strahan had it anymore, whether he could get to the passer, and whether he was any good, because through the first 5 games of the season, incredibly enough, Strahan had a grand total of 0 sacks. None. Zilch. Zip. Nada. Strahan broke the single-season sack record and had no sacks through the first 5 games of the year. So Fox told Peppers not to be discouraged, because his time is going to come, just like it came with Strahan that season. Said Fox, Julius Peppers is a fine football player, and I told him something last night that Michael Strahan broke the all-time sack record, and at the end of 5 games, he had none. Those words resonated with Peppers, and those words were part of what allowed him to go on an absolute tear against the Saints. And you know what? That's an incredible note by this man right here, John Fox. Way to show confidence in your player. Way to encourage him to keep his head up through a tough first quarter of the season. If Michael Strahan can bounce back the way that he did, then by God, so can Julius Peppers. However, there's just one small problem with what Fox said about Strahan. There's just one teeny tiny problem that we need to talk about with this motivational comment, especially in 2007, as in the day and age of the internet. Yeah, none of what he said was true. There was not one part of this man's statement that was even remotely factually correct. And I'm not being pedantic here and saying, oh, he said that Strahan had no sacks, but in reality, in week 3, he had half a sack. Or, it wasn't the first 5 games, it was the first 4 games, and he had 1 sack through 5 games. No, I'm talking that this couldn't possibly be further from the truth. John Fox completely lied to try and motivate Julius Peppers. The lie was so far out of left field that it's like if you tried to motivate a quarterback into breaking the all-time passing touchdowns record in a single season by saying that through his first 5 games in 2013, Peyton Manning didn't throw 1. Because through the first 5 games of the 2001 season, do you want to know how many sacks Michael Strahan had? It wasn't none, like this man right here, John Fox, said. It wasn't 1, it wasn't 2, it wasn't 3, heck, it wasn't even 4, and it wasn't 5, 6, or 7. It was 8.5. Through the first 5 games of the 2001 season, Michael Strahan was not just at 8.5 sacks, but he was on pace for 27 sacks, and was on pace to break the all-time single-season record in any era, official or unofficial. Everyone knew after 5 games that this was a possibility. Everyone knew after 5 games that he was the best in football. In fact, through the first 5 games of the season, I can give you the complete list of players in NFL history at the time to have 8.5 sacks or more. You had William Gay in 1983 with the Detroit Lions. You had Mark Gastineau with the New York Jets in 1984. You had Kevin Green with the Carolina Panthers in 1998. You had Kabir Gbaja-Biamila, KGB, with the Green Bay Packers in 2001, who actually had 9 compared to Strahan's 8.5 to start that season off. And you had Michael Strahan. Strahan was in an exclusive group of 5. In other words, what John Fox said could not be any further from the truth, because through 5 games, the talk around Strahan wasn't, wow, this guy can't get to the quarterback and get a sack. The talk was, holy crap, he might break the record. It's literally like trying to motivate a team by saying that in 1985, the Chicago Bears won the Super Bowl and had the greatest defense ever. And they did it despite starting the season off with an 0-5 record and allowing 300 points in their first 5 games. You know that's not true. Everyone knows that's not true. It's a complete lie. Fox wasn't off by a sack or half a sack with that comment. He was off by, for 95% of defensive ends, what would be an incredible entire season's total in sacks. And remember, when it came to John Fox and his statement, it's not like this was 1983, where people didn't have computers or phones that had access to the internet. It's not like you could just BS someone and actually have them believe an urban legend. This was 2007. This is actually one of the few stories I've covered on this channel where I remember the year in question. Was life in 2007 different than it is today in 2024? Absolutely. But you know what we had in 2007? That's right, the freaking internet! We had Google. We had computers.
We have technology.
We could easily look this stuff up and realize how untrue it was. So I'm not quite sure what John Fox was thinking with those comments, but obviously, this lie didn't hurt anyone, and it was an end to justify a means. So I guess it all worked out in the end, even if what Fox said was not even remotely true by any stretch of the imagination, and by any sense of the word whatsoever. As for what happened after the game between these teams behind me right here, Julius Peppers never quite got going the same way that Michael Strahan did in 2001. Maybe he realized his coach was a big phony. Peppers ended the season with 2.5 sacks, which was a career low for him, and he had 4 passes defended, with 2 of them coming in that game against the Saints. That game against the Saints was also his season high in tackles, as he had 6 tackles in that game, all solo. Obviously, Peppers rebounded nicely after that 2007 season and went on to have an incredible career, but it does raise the question, who do you think had the better career? Julius Peppers or Michael Strahan? They're both Hall of Fame players, and they're both some of the best to ever do it, but who do you think was better? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Normally, I'd wrap up this part by saying what the moral of the story is, or what we learned from this, but honestly, I don't even know. This statement by this man right here, John Fox, was a complete lie, and he absolutely knew it, because no one thinks of Strahan's 2001 season and possibly thinks to themselves, oh, he played like crap for the first half of the year. It wasn't even close to the truth, and it's never good to lie, but it didn't really harm anyone. Strahan's reputation wasn't hurt from this. Peppers used it as motivation. The coach, in a roundabout way, did his job of trying to motivate his players, and it worked out. I honestly don't know what the moral of the story is here. Sometimes it's okay to lie, even if it's blatantly obvious. White lies meant for just one person as a way of positive reinforcement don't hurt anyone? You draw your own conclusions. Either way, on this day in 2007, we knew what the Fox said. A whole bunch of BS. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.